What if I told you there's a forgotten RPG out there that almost outdid Final Fantasy VII in story, ambition, and pure emotional depth, but nearly collapsed under its own weight? Yeah, this game was that close to becoming one of the greatest of all time, and it still might be. This is the wild, painful, and brilliant story behind Xenogears, a game born from frustration, ambition, and a whole lot of chaos. Back in the mid-90s, a couple of creatives inside Square were dreaming bigger than most. Tetsuya Takahashi and Kaori Tanaka, who also goes by her pen name Soraya Saga, had already worked on some huge titles like Final Fantasy VI, but they weren't satisfied just supporting someone else's vision anymore. They wanted to build their own world, one that tackled deeper, more personal themes, and wasn't afraid to challenge players on a philosophical level. So they pitched an idea, a big one. And that idea was meant to be Final Fantasy VII. But Square thought it was way too dark, too complicated, and honestly, too weird. So the studio passed on it, but instead of shelving the project, Sakaguchi, the legend behind Final Fantasy, gave Takahashi the green light to turn it into something new. And that's how Xenogears was born. From day one, this was a passion project, but also one stacked with problems. Most of the team was brand new to 3D development, and the project was already ambitious as hell. Imagine trying to teach people how to swim while building the pool at the same time. That's what this development was like. And while Final Fantasy VII got all the attention, resources, and hype, Xenogears was quietly being made in the shadows with a smaller budget and a ton of creative pressure. Still, Takahashi refused to shrink the scope. He and Saga went all in, writing out a massive story filled with religious symbolism, psychological trauma, and sci-fi themes that most games wouldn't even touch back then. The early days of Xenogears were rough. The game didn't just start as an original idea. It was originally pitched as a sequel to Chrono Trigger, but things got complicated fast. The publishers didn't fully buy into it, debates dragged on, and the whole thing got reworked into a standalone project with the codename Project Noah. Meanwhile, Final Fantasy VII was already deep in development, getting all the big money and studio muscle behind it. Xenogears, on the other hand, wasn't so lucky. The budget was tight, the team was mostly new and figuring things out as they went, and the vision behind the game was massive, like way bigger than what the hardware and resources could realistically handle. Takahashi wanted a full 3D world, but technical limitations forced them to mix 3D environments with 2D sprites for the characters. Strangely enough, that visual style actually aged better than you'd expect. Some fans, me included, even prefer it to the early 3D models in Final Fantasy VII. What's wild about Xenogears is that, visually, it actually nailed something special. Even with all the tech limits of the PS1, that mix of 3D backgrounds and 2D sprites gave the game a really unique look. It wasn't trying to be flashy like Final Fantasy VIII or IX. It had its own style, and honestly, it worked. The camera angles, the cutscene compositions, the way scenes were framed, it all gave the story more weight. Like the devs were aiming for something way more cinematic than most games at the time. But no matter how good it looked, the cracks started showing, especially on Disc 2. That's where the pressure really hit. Deadlines were brutal, the team was exhausted, and they just couldn't finish the game the way they wanted. Some of the devs have even said it was hell. You can feel it in how fast the pacing shifts, and how much of the story suddenly becomes just narration. It's like they had to wrap everything up with tape and hope it held together. Takahashi himself admitted that he had a bad feeling from the start. They were caught between two of Square's biggest projects and didn't have the backing they needed. Stress levels were through the roof. We're talking serious health scares, people breaking down, and a team that basically powered through on pure will. A big part of what makes Xenogears so fascinating and frustrating is how uneven it feels. The ambition behind it was massive, maybe too massive for the time and tools they had. And while Square definitely didn't give the team enough support, a lot of the chaos also came from within. Takahashi kept expanding the story during development, pushing for more and more, even when it was clear the team was running out of time. It's like he couldn't stop chasing the perfect version of his vision, no matter how unrealistic it was. That's why Disc 1 and Disc 2 feel like two completely different games. The first half plays like a classic JRPG, exploration, side quests, battles, and a world full of secrets to uncover. Then Disc 2 hits, and it's mostly characters sitting in chairs, telling you what happened instead of letting you play through it. Dungeons get skipped, story arcs are condensed, and some boss fights just show up out of nowhere after a wall of text. It's jarring. And yeah, it can turn some people off. But even with that, I still seriously recommend playing Xenogears. There's nothing else quite like it. The combat is creative, the visuals are striking, but it's the story and the layers underneath it that make the game truly stand out. And here's the thing. If you go in with some understanding of the ideas behind it, the whole experience makes way more sense. Xenogears pulls from deep wells of psychology, philosophy, and religion. Knowing even a bit about those influences helps you follow the twists, the symbolism, and all the heavy stuff the game throws at you. Hey guys, if you're enjoying this video, do me a favor and drop a like, subscribe to the channel, and hit that notification bell. And if you want to go the extra mile, becoming a channel member helps a ton and gives you early access to all future videos. Thanks for the support, and now, back to the video. Xenogears isn't just a story about good versus evil or saving the world. It digs way deeper than that. The people behind it, especially Takahashi and his wife, who co-wrote the game, were obsessed with psychology, philosophy, and the big questions most games never touch. And you can feel it in almost every scene. The characters aren't just dealing with outside enemies. They're wrestling with trauma, identity, control, and inner demons that reflect real psychological theories. You'll spot influences from thinkers like Freud, Jung, and Horney all over the place. And it's not just name-dropping. They actually build the story around these ideas. Take the relationship between the main character and his mother. It mirrors Karen Horney's theory that what damages kids isn't always what happens to them. It's how they perceive it. That's a core part of his backstory, and it hits hard. Then there's the religious side of the game, which gets really misunderstood. Xenogears isn't just trying to be edgy or anti-faith. It pulls from Gnostic beliefs, specifically the idea of the demiurge, a flawed or even evil god who creates the material world, but isn't the true divine source. So when the game talks about God, it's not taking shots at mainstream religion. It's questioning authority, blind obedience, and systems of control, not belief itself. And the themes don't stop there. The game takes on classism, racism, child abuse, and the idea that trauma can shape a person's entire life. It's heavy stuff, but it's told through characters you care about, in a world that feels lived in and real. One of the most overlooked stories behind Xenogears is the guy who had to translate the whole thing alone, Richard Honeywood. While most games had a team, Xenogears handed one of the longest and most complex scripts Square ever produced to a single person. And to make things harder, the script dove deep into Gnostic theology, psychological theory, and abstract philosophical debates. It wasn't just hard to translate, it was risky. Most translators backed off early on, worried that the religious themes might stir up backlash in the West. So Honeywood stuck it out by himself, doing his best to bring clarity to something that wasn't always clear in the original. And sure, some lines feel clunky or awkward, especially near the end. But the fact that he pulled it off at all is honestly impressive. Now, on the audio side of things, Xenogears has some of the most memorable music and sound design of the PS1 era. The impact of every death blow in battle feels intense, thanks to the sharp sound effects. But the real emotional weight comes from the soundtrack, composed by Yasunori Mitsuda. It captures the soul of the game, its sadness, mystery, and sense of something greater beneath the surface. Still, there's a catch. The game's huge, clocking in at over 50 hours, but it only has around 40 tracks. And you can compare that to Final Fantasy VII, which has more than double the number of songs for a shorter game. So yeah, some tracks get reused a lot, and that repetition can mess with the mood of certain scenes. One of the few frustrating parts about Xenogears' soundtrack is how often it reuses the same tracks in moments that clearly needed something different. There's this boss fight, for example, that plays out during a major turning point in the story. Tense, emotional, high stakes. And what do you hear? A soft, hopeful melody that was earlier tied to a touching character scene. It kills the tension. Not because the song is bad, but because it just doesn't fit. It's like playing a love song during a car crash. Totally wrong vibe. But that's not on the composer. That's on how the music was implemented. The truth is, Yasunori Mitsuda did an incredible job under insane pressure. His work tied the entire game together. When the project felt like it was falling apart, his music brought heart and structure to it. Takahashi himself said that once the music was added, things started to finally feel right. And you can tell, when the music does hit, it elevates everything. It makes the themes feel heavier, the emotions stronger, and the world more alive. But that level of quality came at a cost. Just like with Chrono Trigger, Mitsuda pushed himself way too hard. He worked to the point of burning out, risking his health to deliver something unforgettable. Yasunori Mitsuda's path through the industry is both inspiring and brutal. After delivering unforgettable work on Chrono Trigger, he jumped from one intense project to another: Radical Dreamers, Front Mission Gun Hazard, Tobal No. 1, and then Xenogears. But behind the scenes, the constant pressure and lack of rest were destroying his health. Project after project, he pushed himself to the edge, often ending up in the hospital by the time the credits rolled. When he joined Square, he saw it as a launchpad for something bigger. But after Xenogears, the cost of staying started to outweigh the benefits. He realized he couldn't keep sacrificing his body and mind for the sake of deadlines. So he left, stepping away from the company that gave him his start, and started taking control of his life again. He quit smoking, changed his habits, and started prioritizing health over hustle. And even though he never returned to Square full-time, he did come back briefly to score Chrono Cross, another incredible piece of work. Later, he reconnected with Takahashi for Xenosaga, bringing that same emotional depth to a new universe. Xenogears might be known for its story first, but the gameplay has some cool ideas going on too. The world is built in full 3D and you can rotate the camera freely, which opens up a lot of room for exploration. Hidden chests, secret paths, there's always something off the beaten path if you're willing to look for it. That said, the camera isn't perfect. Sometimes tall objects block your view, and a lot of the environments look really similar, which can make certain dungeons feel like a maze of identical hallways. And then there's the platforming. Yeah, it's clunky, the jumping mechanics aren't super tight, and the controls can feel floaty. Some players absolutely hate those parts and others just power through them. Either way, they break up the pacing in a way that not everyone is going to enjoy. But when it comes to combat, Xenogears brings something special. It's turn-based, like most RPGs from that era, but it adds a twist. Instead of picking attack and watching a generic animation play out, you get a combo system. Each character has ability points that let you chain together different button inputs, triangle, square, and X, to create unique attack strings. Weaker moves cost less, stronger ones cost more, and as you level up, you unlock powerful death blows tied to specific combos. And one of the coolest things about Xenogears combat is the death blow system. On the surface, it looks like a standard turn-based setup: pick your attack, land a hit, and repeat. But there's way more going on behind the scenes. Every time you input a combo of triangle, square, and X during a fight, the game is secretly tracking those patterns. You're actually building experience in each specific button combo, and that's how you unlock new death blows. But here's the catch. It doesn't tell you any of this. There's no guide, no hints. You just have to experiment. Different button combos unlock different moves, and each button has multiple hidden animations tied to it. Once you unlock a new death blow, though, it feels amazing. The animations are flashy, the impact is satisfying, and they deal serious damage. There's also a cool mechanic where you can skip your turn and save up ability points to unload a massive combo later. One of the most fun things in Xenogears is stacking up your ability points, then unloading a flurry of death blows in a single turn. It's insanely satisfying, especially when you're up against those late-game bosses that hit like trucks and counter death blows. But the real twist comes when you jump into the gear battles. Fighting in Gears changes the whole dynamic. Instead of ability points, you've got fuel. Every action burns through it: basic attacks, death blows, even just moving. And once you run out, you're basically done. That means you have to think carefully about how hard you go in each turn. What's cool is that gear combat isn't just about mashing buttons. Your setup matters. Different parts and accessories drastically change your performance. Some parts boost attack power but burn fuel like crazy. Others let you last longer in a fight but hit a little softer. So, do you go all in and try to end it fast, or play it safe, dragging out the fight and wear the enemy down? It's up to you. This adds a surprising amount of depth. There were fights where I got wrecked until I realized I needed to swap out a part or two. Once I did, suddenly that same boss went down without a problem. It rewards players who pay attention and aren't afraid to experiment. Sure, regular battles outside the gears can start to feel a little samey, especially once you've unlocked stronger death blows that pretty much replace the weaker ones. But even then, there's still some variety, especially when elemental damage comes into play. Some enemies have weaknesses you can exploit if you've got the right death blows. Xenogears is one of those rare games that feels broken and brilliant at the same time. It's packed with bold ideas, deep themes, and emotional storytelling, but you can tell it didn't get the time or support it needed to reach its full potential. The experience is messy, sometimes even frustrating. But somehow, that roughness only adds to its charm. Disc 2 is where things really fall apart. The pacing nosedives, huge parts of the story get rushed, and you're left watching characters explain plot points from chairs instead of playing through them. And yet the story they're telling is so rich and thought-provoking that you keep watching anyway. It's not polished, but it means something. The combat has its quirks. Some mechanics are barely explained. The environments start to blur together. But behind those flaws is a game that constantly reaches for something greater. It's trying to say something about identity, trauma, control, and faith, things most RPGs don't even touch. Some players believe that the game's fractured feeling might actually reflect its core message, that brokenness is part of the human condition. But maybe that wasn't intentional. Takahashi himself admitted that parts of the game make him cringe in hindsight, but the emotional impact is real and it lasts. Xenogears deserves more than it got. It deserves a second chance, a full remake, with the time and resources to bring Takahashi's vision to life the way it was meant to be. But even in its original form, it stands out. So what about you? Did Xenogears leave the same impact on you? Or did the flaws outweigh the brilliance? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I'd love to hear your take. If you enjoyed the video, hit that like button, and don't forget to subscribe for more deep dives like this one. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.